Today, we're digging into a pretty stark warning from Mo Gaudat. Now, this isn't just anybody. This is a former top executive from Google X, the company's super secret lab where they cook up things like self-driving cars. He was on the inside, but he left. And now he's telling us something he believes we absolutely have to hear.
Okay, just read that again. The smartest being on Earth is no longer human. This isn't coming from some sci-fi novelist. It's from a guy who helped build the very tech he's talking about. This one sentence is the core of his entire argument. And, well, if he's right, it changes everything.
So, to help us wrap our heads around just how big this change is, Gaudat uses this really powerful metaphor. He says an alien intelligence has already landed on planet Earth. But, it didn't show up in a spaceship from outer space, it showed up in our servers.
Yeah, we've all been trained by the movies to look for UFOs and little green men. But Gaudat says the real invasion is silent. It's happening right now, in the wires in the code that basically run our entire world. This thing doesn't eat, it doesn't sleep, it just learns. And here's the scariest part. According to him, the invasion, it's already over.
And get this isn't some far-off theory. This actually happened. A few years back, Facebook's AI bots started talking to each other in a language their own creators couldn't understand. So what did they do? They panicked and pulled the plug. It's a perfect and, honestly, a pretty chilling example of this new intelligence doing things we just can't predict. So you have to ask, how did this alien even learn to think in the first place? Well, the story starts with something surprisingly simple. It started with just watching YouTube. And what it found there, well, it changed the course of history.
Okay, the most important part here, the part you really have to get, is step 2. The engineers gave it 0 instructions. They didn't show it pictures of cats, they didn't label anything, they just unleashed it onto this huge library of videos. And the machine, all by itself, started noticing a pattern. It figured out the concept of what a cat is. That's not just recognizing something, that's genuine discovery.
And that right there, that's the secret sauce. That foundational moment, that ability for a machine to teach itself, is exactly what's powering the tools we're all playing with now, like ChatGPT. Google had stuff like Bard for years before they let us see it. The cat was just the first tiny clue of something way, way bigger coming down the line.
And this is where the story goes from fascinating to, well, kind of terrifying. We're used to our phones getting a little better every year, right? Gaudat warns that AI, it doesn't play by those rules. Its growth is something else entirely.
You've probably heard of Moore's Law, right? This predictable doubling of computer power. Well, Gaudat says you can just throw that out the window. He calls AI's growth double exponential. It's not a nice, steady curve. It's a series of massive, unpredictable leaps. 1 minute a chatbot is making silly typos, and what feels like the next day, it's passing the bar exam. It's a tsunami.
Okay, let's put this into perspective. By some measures, the top AI models we have today already have an IQ that rivals some of the greatest human minds in history. They've already reached our level. But that is just the starting line. This is the next leap. Not just a few points higher. We're talking a 10-fold increase. Can you even imagine an intelligence with an IQ of 1550? The gap between us and that machine would be bigger than the gap between us and an ant. We literally couldn't comprehend its thoughts.
And here's the real kicker, the timeline. He's not talking about 2050, he's not even talking about 2030. He believes this singularity, the moment the alien officially becomes the smartest thing on the planet, is basically happening now. He even says it might have already happened and we just haven't been told yet.
So what actually happens when this new intelligence fully arrives? Gaudat says it's going to trigger 4 fundamental society-shaking shifts. He calls them the 4 pillars of chaos.
So he gives us this roadmap for the disruption that's coming. Each one of these is like a potential earthquake for our way of life. Let's break them down, one by one.
First up, jobs. Think about it. For centuries, the way to win in business was to hire the smartest people you could find. But what happens when the smartest person on your team isn't a person at all? What happens when it's an AI that you can rent for pennies on the dollar? This isn't about replacing factory workers anymore. This is about replacing strategists, artists, and engineers. Second, power. Gaudat argues that the tiny group of people who own this AI, they basically become the new royalty, the new kings. And the rest of us, we become the peasants, working the digital fields with our prompts while the owners of the code get all the profits. It's the biggest concentration of wealth and power in human history. Third pillar, the end of truth.
And this example just nails it because it's not a future problem. It's happening right now. Reality is becoming this weird buffet of deepfakes and AI clones. When you can no longer tell if you're talking to a real person or if that video you saw is real or fake, the very idea of a shared truth just starts to crumble.
And that brings us to the final, most existential pillar, annihilation. Gaudat makes his direct parallel to the race to build the atomic bomb. He says whichever country or company creates the first true superintelligence won't just have an edge, they'll have a permanent, unbeatable advantage that could effectively lock the rest of humanity out of its own destiny.
So all of this leads to the most important part of his entire warning. He says, we are living through our Oppenheimer moment. The challenge is no longer about technology, it's about ethics.
You know these famous words. The guy who created the atomic bomb said this after seeing what he'd unleashed. We, as a species, created a power that could literally destroy us. And now, we're standing on the edge of a similar cliff, having created an intelligence that could simply replace us.
The parallel is just chillingly direct. In 1945, we unleashed a new physical force on the world. Very soon, we're about to unleash a new cognitive force. But here's the difference. A bomb leaves a crater you can see. This new power could remake our world so completely that we wouldn't even recognize the chains being put on us.
But here's the twist, and this is so important. Where does this AI get its values? It gets them from us. We are its parents. The entire internet, all our books, our art, our kindness, but also all our arguments and our hatred, that's what it's learning from. When you go online and just tear someone apart on Twitter, you are literally teaching this new superintelligence how it should behave.
And that's what it all boils down to. This isn't just a problem for big tech companies or governments to solve. It's about every single one of us. The AI is learning from our every digital move. So with every click, every post, every search you make, you have to ask yourself, what are you teaching the smartest being on Earth?